can't get these memories out of my mind. It's some kind of madness that started to evolve. You and I tried so hard to let you go, but some kind of madness is swallowing me whole. You and yeah, finally see that. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of Hot Bananas, where we're talking about madness in the mundane. So we have 3 guests in our show. I've got 2 bananas here that I've drawn on, but just the point of this is that this represents a metaphor for a social object. And for the next hour, it's going to run like this. We have 3 guests with their signifiers, fancy word for a hot banana, an object of their choice regarding madness and mayhem. They will talk for 10 minutes, roughly, a bit of show and tell, and then we'll let the 3 of them have a conversation afterwards, see what comes up with their surprise object, blend it a little bit towards the end of the hour to just ask the question, so what? Interesting to have conversations and opinions, but what are we going to make out of this, and kind of turning the interesting conversations into practical making. So that's pretty much it. And without further ado, let's leave it to Mothiur, who's our first guest. And over to you.
Thanks, Rena. So my object is something very mundane. Bread. Been around over around 10,000 years, first in Egypt. Beginning of the Holocene era, which we might have heard about as we losing the Holocene. We're coming out of the Holocene, but the Holocene was the start of the stable conditions that allowed agriculture, and so bread to come into being. And tasty it is, but actually this bit is tasty. But if you look down there, you might see, well, the beginnings of mold. The beginnings of mold that's growing, and we often see mold on bread, and we throw it away. But what actually is mold? You know, I was thinking about molds. I've got these slides to show. Can you see the slides?
Yeah.
Let me just start. Okay. Come on. Okay, so mold. This is another bit of mold. It's not my pot of food, but you can see the rice and the mold growing out from there, and it's just like taking over and exploring. When we give it some space, you actually see quite beautiful patterns growing out from mold, and it's a kind of exploration by something called hyphae, which is kind of like moving out and exploring its environment, and it can actually move in quite almost in ways which actually which looks at the collective, looks at its own intelligence. Mold as a fungus, it's its own entire kingdom, like separate from plants and animals. And plants actually wouldn't be able to survive outside of water without the help of fungus. And there was a collaboration between fungus and plants millions of years ago that allowed plants to come out of the water, and actually the fungus began taking as the way for the plants to actually grow its nutrients. So 90% of plants actually depend on fungus, and it's called mycorrhizal networks, this fungi. And from the Greek, mycos, meaning fungus, and riser meaning roots. So it's actually the beginning of a root system from this kind of exploratory foraging behavior from these hyphae. And what's that got to do with madness, you might say? Well, this is a nice little French town. Again, a bit mundane, boring. Nothing much is happening in this French town, except on 1951, August the 15th, 1951, there was a mass outbreak of madness in this town. 250 people went crazy. Well, we say crazy, what does it actually mean to be crazy? But they had hallucinations. 50 people were put into an asylum. They were having convulsions. There were hallucinations of being eaten by snakes coming out of the body. So bread of madness infects a town. What is this? You know, yeah, there's been no the main conclusion that came out from this was that it was an infection of we call it infection or contamination. The fungus might have just called it an exploration, but there's a fungus that grows on rye grain, and it's called ergot. So it's no form of ergotism. It's called as a kind of madness, and ergotism is another name for it in the medieval times, because that's when it started, because they have a different perspective there. They didn't know about this fungus. They called it St. Anthony's fire, or holy fire as well, because St. Anthony was born, is depicted here, 251 AD. Rich man, sort of wealthy, gave away all his possessions to retreat to the desert in Egypt for over 20 years. And he was seen, and it's part of Christian theology, that his resistance to the temptations of the devil, as you can see here, and so that kind of, those kind of struggles were seen as a kind of holy fire. And in the Middle Ages, is it being mad? Is it being holy to have been infected by this ergotism? So, you know, there's this question that we can look at when we often think about madness. You know, what actually is madness? What is it? What's its behavior? What is it showing? And when you think about the collaboration between fungus and plants, there's actually a collaboration between fungus and animals too. This is what's called the fungus Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, a fungus that actually takes over an ant's body, and actually not only it controls its behavior. So the ant will move all the way up the tree out of its normal behavior, and then the fungus grows out of its brain, and because it's where it can spore then. So it's actually using the ant for its own behavior, and it's why it's called a zombie ant. Don't worry, it's not. We don't get it here in England. And so we can see this collaboration between fungus and plants, and it's just a question I ask about when we think about madness. There's a lot of people who think about fungus, and that maybe in the early times when the humans were coming into there was a type of fungus that might have had some impact upon our own ways of intelligence. Who knows what kinds of collaborations are there deeply within ourselves. So that's from bread to madness and the mundane. Thanks.
Great. Give us this day our daily bread, our daily madness. Fantastic. Oh, it's like always a surprise. Like, okay, from bread, very common and mundane, and like the mold, like yeah. We'll pause there, and I'm sure Ben and James have something to say about that. But we'll tag now on to James next.
Unmute first, and I probably will have to share I will share my screens. Thank you so much. That was very interesting. I was just taking some notes there, so make sure that I remember some of these questions I'm going to ask. I think I need you need to stop sharing in order for me to share.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. I brought two objects, but it's relevant. But the first object, I actually don't have it, but you will see. Is a brick. Can you guys see my screen? So what's interesting, I was having a conversation with someone here about this movie from, I think, good 20-something years ago. It's called Indecent Proposal. And it's about, well, I'm not going to go to the synopsis, but let's, and that's a separate conversation. But it talks about brick. It talks about this particular object I find really quite interesting, and it's quite relevant to what I do. And Woody Harrelson, the actor, was an architect, and he's explaining to a group in a classroom, and took out this piece of brick and asked them, what is it? What is a brick? Can you tell me? And a few students answered. It was quite humorous. It was quite funny. But he basically turned on. I'll go to quickly, a synopsis of what he said. He said, a brick is obviously more than a brick, and hopefully you will see this. And he quote, actually, Woody Harrelson was quoting Louis Kahn, who said, a famous architect. He said, even a brick wants to be something more. Even a brick wants to be something. And what he was referring to, what a brick can do. And obviously from ancient times, a brick wants to be something more. So they have these collages of images of really grand, of the pyramids, a very grand structure that is built by this really humble, simple brick. And it went on, and it eventually ended here. Even a brick wants to be something more. Now, I don't want to talk about specifically the memorable part of the scene is obviously that it was very visual, but there was an earlier part where they asked a bunch of students, what's the brick? And someone, when he was holding the brick up, and he asked what that is. And one student came up and said, it's a weapon. And it got a good laugh, but for him, I guess it got a good laugh. But I guess if you think about it, you can build a pyramid, you can build the Empire State Building, you can build houses, you can build a shelter. But in the ancient time, or even now, if you're under threat, the brick it won't matter that you're a pyramid. It won't matter whatever it is. It is a weapon. It is a weapon at a certain time. His perspective no less valid than Louis Kahn's. So let me. Why am I getting at this? So for what we do, the object I really want to talk about is another brick. It's a brick that we created. Something like this. It's called a brick. But what it actually is, if you don't know, it's actually a battery. And what I want to talk about today was actually the perspective, like what's valid and how every single perspective, even on this brick. Well, I'll describe what it is. This is a battery. You can see these cells. It's kind of like your AA cells. It's all put together. The only difference with this brick is it's the most advanced battery in the world. It has highest density. This is what is, that's charging the Tesla battery. So the fastest production vehicle, the fastest passenger vehicle you can buy today is powered by these batteries. Actually, it's exact same company, exact same type, exact same chemistry. So let's go to perspective. For UK users, this particular brick means I can charge my phone. I can charge the computer that I'm currently using, and we do. And we are currently actually charging with these bricks. We're currently charging my entire lab. All the computer devices in where we work. My entire team of 9 engineers. But what is designed for? But that's another perspective. For what it's designed for, the uniqueness of this, which I will go into. But for African. Let's say someone in Africa without grid, without electricity from a wall socket, all of a sudden this is more. This can still charge their phone, they can still charge their laptop, they can still charge the devices, but all of a sudden it's more. It can charge their light. Now it becomes their livelihood, their only communication device, the only illumination. And if they're farming, this could charge their irrigation. This can be a charge of water pumps. So for them, I guess this brick is a power plant. And obviously this is energy storage with the solar panel. It's a power plant. Now let's continue this line of thought let's stay in Africa, in these rural places without, because there are about 1 billion people without stable electricity, and a lot of them live there. So to the people that will, so you see this looks quite advanced. So the guys that have to come in and install it and fix this, to a maintenance engineer, what is this? This is a problem. This is like, if this breaks, they look at this. This is a problem. What do you do with this? This is like, this is not produced natively. This is from China. This battery is from Japan. These little parts from UK. For them, this is a lot. For the maintenance engineer, this is liability. This is them coming in. Them coming in and not able to fix this means someone will not have their food will spoil, may not have lights for the kids to go to do their homework. It's a problem. So then, so that perspective is again very important. So therefore, obviously, I will come back. Then we made it. We look into an engineering aspect. We made the design very simple, where his perspective or her perspective is no longer a problem. Someone that can fix a bike will be able to fix someone's power plant. Okay, so for the technophile, let's go back. Just jump continents. Let's go to from Africa. Go back to the UK. A technophile. What is this brick? I might not have told you. This brick is also a Wi-Fi. It has computer chips inside. By itself, it will create its own. It's a smartphone. By itself, it has communication capability. It will generate Wi-Fi. This brick has AI in it. You were able to detect how each battery is doing. And the reason for that is that now you no longer need the Japanese cells. You can have cells from China, or you can have used cells from electric vehicle, from your laptop that can be used. So a technophile, this is a smartphone. This is a computer. This brick has algorithm where you will get the maximum life out of it. And not only that, you can use this. This is the energy source, or it is the device that connects you to the world. And it has really quite advanced software that's built in a very thoughtful way. So for them, that for technophile, they will appreciate that. Okay, we're still in the UK. Let's talk about. I'm away my. I still have 3 minutes. Let's go to the money people. Money is important. The capitalists, the VC. What is this brick? Well, to them, if all of a sudden this brick can go to Africa, they now have 1.2 billion customers. And to them this is replacing the current system. This is a much better systems to power the solar panel, to all the big infrastructure project that's going on. And to them, this is the lowest cost power plant that you can install. And for them, it's money. It is a huge customer base. The technology is right. It's low maintenance. Is how you can scale what you can do, and because it's so smart, because you no longer need Japanese cells, or you can use battery in there. And to them, it's exploring a totally different market that's currently has not been addressed, because all these electrification, all these batteries, all these electric car, Tesla you hear about, in about a few years, those minerals, those very precious minerals will start functioning as per their intention, and you have to recycle them. Oh, let me go back to the recycling now. To the recyclers, not the money people, but nonetheless, that's a huge economic incentive to get the most out of this. It's really expensive. You see, this is shiny. There's all these precious metals, strangely, from Africa, from the ground of Africa, ends up in the UK. So I guess it's going back to the source. They need to maintain it. They need to rip it up. It takes a lot of energy. It's very dirty to recycle them. To a recycler, this is a solution. This is a way where you can have a portion of things that otherwise can still have usage, and we use them, and that's a monetary value that they can derive from them. So it's both for them for green, as well also supports their business case. And I think lastly, the second to last is policymakers. So to the governments, the people that make those power plants, decide the 10-year infrastructure to build roads. This allows them to think a little bit bigger, to say, what if a power plant is contained in a brick? what if this is actually a solar panel and a storage device will solve the energy problem for about the 2 billion people that will have no electricity in 2050, in 30 years from now. Now, I'll go back to sharing the screen. So actually, I apologize. I just realized I should have unshared. Now, the last perspective I want to give, this is my perspective. I'm along with the company, along with the entrepreneur, I'm one of the sponsors for orphanage in Uganda. And to me, the brick is an alternative solution. Instead of running a diesel generator for the computer classroom in this orphanage, they can use the solar power, the solar panels efficiently using our energy and give education to a few of these kids that we're sponsoring. And ultimately, I think that perspective, that human perspective, is if not the most important one of all the ones that I have mentioned. Thank you.
Great. I was just taking notes there. Thank you very much, James. So just to recap where we are before we go on to Ben. I've decided to playfully call you the plebeians today, as is the subject of Madness in the Mundane. So we have had a piece of bread with some mold from Mothiur, different types of bricks from James. And what I'm going to do is just like let Ben take the next spot.
Okay.
Over to
Share my screen with you.
Sorry, press the wrong button.
all good. Welcome back.
No problem. So yeah, if I share my screen with you. Excuse me. Okay, is this all good?
Not yet.
Oh, sorry, bear with me 1 second.
So I found out I didn't have any paper, so I've been writing notes on a piece of banana skin. Topical prop.
How are we doing? Can you see what I'm seeing? Yeah.
Okay.
Technology, there we go. So, yeah, I have been working in the sort of art world behind the scenes for some time as an art handler, now as an art shipper. I'm kind of taken on the technical side, but we were talking about mundanity and madness, and there's plenty of that in the art world in front of the public as well as behind the scenes. But I'm going to talk about the humble shipping crate. It's something that we deal with a lot. It's something I have to measure up and design and see packed very often. But basically, when an artwork has to travel for exhibition, they require protection from the elements and even the individuals handling and transporting them. So you think of the package that we've all had arrive on our doorstep with the corner smashed in and the shredded packaging and yeah, the outer wrapping in tatters. Yes, plenty of examples you can find of interesting delivery services. But taking that basic principle, you kind of expand it to encompass objects of high value, whether it be historical or monetary or cultural. You can understand that the importance of the conservation of these objects. And the lengths that the owners will go to, really, whether it be private individuals or museums or in institutions, they want to protect them while they're in transit. So individual items can have inherent fragilities. That can cause damage. If the artwork's subjected to things like vibration and shock in transit, rapid changes in temperature and relative humidity that can cause quite drastic, possibly permanent effects on the conditions of the artworks and these objects. This is where the shipping crate comes in. It's essentially, it's just a rigid container with something soft inside, if you break it down to the sort of the basics. And it's acting as a buffer to the outside world. So there's lots of things you find stuck on the sides of crates showing someone's tipped something over and they shouldn't have, that kind of thing. The scale of the artworks can inform the way it's packed and the sort of packaging that's required. The mode of transport, the distance it's going to travel, these are all things that people would take into consideration when they're sort of thinking about this stuff. Here we've got a painting that's larger than the truck, so it has to be tipped over on a diagonal simply to get it in and out of the vehicle and to ship it across the world. So most artists might well probably start out hiring a Luton van themselves and delivering their own artworks to an exhibition space. So that's all well and good. I've done it myself. But at some point, the artist has to hand over those responsibilities. So even when the artwork changes possession, say from the curator to a new owner, that responsibility for the safe existence passes on from the creator and the artist. And after this process of acquisition, that responsibility moves on. Or does it? Is the creator required to consider the lifespan of the art object? You know, do they even care about the longevity of the object, or is the fact that it's short-lived and it has an ephemeral nature, is that part of this creative process? You know, the question is, do you actually give a monkeys about it? Once it's gone away, do you care? You've sold it or you've swapped it for something, is an exchange, or you've passed it on and gifted it. Is it your responsibility anymore, you know? So the art object is viewed often as a commodity. It has been so for quite some time. I'd say the act of acquiring artworks is still described as patronizing the arts. You know, it's a very old school way of thinking. And I don't think that's changed. It's become kind of turbocharged in the last couple of decades, in my view, and my sort of experience. And current art markets, they're just crazy. They're superheated. Due to, what do you mean? I mean, the economic shenanigans of the last couple of decades, there's been all sorts of things going on. And these, there's that current vogue for art acquisition among high net worth individuals. So these excruciatingly like high values have informed the need for things like insurance. And it's not an exciting thing, but insurers have a very large say in how these processes take shape, really. And they demand certain suppliers and routes and methods of transport. Now, I'm using the shipping crate as a metaphor for the sort of extensive industries that are included within the art world, like the fabricator or the shipping agent, say. Just as an example of the sort of services that an artist would hopefully require in their professional lives as creators. Times change, you know, attitudes have moved on quite a lot since say, late 80s, early 90s. You know, things within museums have changed a lot. Ideas about acquisitions and legalities of where objects are acquired from, that type of things, I'm finding quite fascinating. But there are certain standards that museums and borrowing organisations must adhere to, so they have to fulfil requirements of a loan agreement. And you must ask yourself how you cover yourself against the damage or loss of your artworks. If you're the artist and you send your babies across the world, are they going to come back in one piece or at all? I mean, if you've ever met a loss adjuster for an insurance company They're quite reptilian in their ways, and their job is to make sure that their company does not pay out for the loss of your artworks. It's simply the way it's done. So it's a sort of I'd say maybe if I go back to the sort of nuts and bolts of the shipping crate, if the artwork is only traveling one way, then the packaging is most likely going to have a single use. And we're all very aware of this sort of need for disposal on arrival, but it's hugely wasteful when sustainability has become such an important part of our lives. The waste produced within the art industry is frankly embarrassing. I mean, there's a lifespan to a lot of these items, and once they no longer have a use, they have to be disposed of. So if you take that kind of model of what's a defunct model now of the art fair, where huge volumes of art objects are exhibited and sold, and there are dozens per year, or there were, there currently are. Whether or not that model resurfaces is a bit of an unknown at the moment. But all of these objects can be sold and they're shipped onto their new owners across the globe. And the production of a timber crate with a foam lining seems quite questionable when it's going to become landfill after that journey. So the touring museum exhibition can at least argue that they've got multiple venues, and the timescale and the numbers of people that will have access to these traveling shows. More people would experience these objects that otherwise would have to visit the UK or whichever country they're housed in, whatever collections they are. The tour will eventually come to an end, and there's going to be that sort of need for disposal still, and that's still a concern because it's vast volume really. So individuals have attempted to upcycle these waste materials into other objects for new purposes and hopefully a longer lifespan, but there are always limits to the uptake of these projects and ideas. And there have been developments in the field like reusable crating stretching back to the 1990s, like Turtlebox, a Dutch company, Van Kralingen, came up with these sort of crates with an inner Velcro system, so you could actually clamp objects inside without having to replace the outer crate. It's a sort of a modular system. There are others like Rockbox, but quite frankly not as good, and they're something like polyethylene, so it is recyclable, but they're not particularly good in terms of performance. And it's also taking a long time for attitudes within institutions like museums to change. The last time there was a big conference about this was mid-1990s, and the information that was gleaned from that by lots of institutions was taken away, and it's still being worked on now. And it needs updating, quite frankly, and there's lots of people keen to update it and change what's seen as best practice, but at the minute, it's not particularly a fast process in getting them to move on. So I'll take you back to the humble shipping crate. So much used and abused and knocked around across the world, but it can still be an interesting object in itself. It has some valuable form as like provenance, like the pages of a passport or the exhibition labels you find on the back of a frame. It gives you a bit of a life scale, you know, sort of history to an object, and they can be quite fascinating in a very mundane way. So that's me.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everyone, really. Some fascinating kind of objects there. So I'll do a quick recap for us. So this is what we've got. We have from Mothiur started a piece of bread with mold. The humble brick from James, and the wooden crate from Ben. So what next? But now I leave it to the three of you to kind of reveal your thoughts and questions for each other. I have mine on a piece of banana and I'll chime in when necessary, but it's up to the three of you now.
First of all, I just want to apologize. I remember I probably have a double screens while I was speaking for a good, a good 8 minutes. With and that must be quite annoying to watch me speaking. But maybe I'll talk about the mold. What I found really interesting, what I want to know more is about this potentially symbiotic relationship between the mold and organism, in particular humans. How who knows? Maybe we were shaped. We know we have symbiotic relationship with microbes within our guts. But maybe a particular mold for, and I'm American, well, I'm American and British, and the Wonder Bread, maybe I'm related to the Wonder Bread.
Oh, Mothiur, you need to.
Sorry. Yeah. Yes. No. That's a great question. Yeah. So about symbiotic relationships, a lot of this. I've just been reading Merlin Sheldrake's book called Entangled Life, and all this is very new thinking. Like, even though fungus is like one of the oldest sort of organisms, we haven't really studied it, and it talks a lot about lichen as well. Lichen are actually now known to be an actual symbiotic relationship between fungus and algae. And it wasn't actually understood at the time because people thought, we have a story of competition all the time. So everyone's like, no, it must be actually a parasitical relationship because we have that story. And he's demonstrating how strong some stories are that we don't even notice. The science can't even tell that the symbiosis is even there. And so it's taken a while for that to come and be proven. So I want to relate that to almost going back to, the story about even a brick wants to be something. That's a story, like the story of progress. What is the story of progress that we have within ourselves? We can link it back to the Protestant work ethic and Locke saying, if you make use of land, it gives you a right over it. John Locke, at the beginning of the period of democracy. So we've got this story, and I think, what does it want to be? Like we have this idea of the object affects ourselves, and Karen Barad, she's talking about a gentle realism. But the different, we have a structure of language that breaks between object and subject. But what if everything wants to be something? Everything is trying to be something, and I just want to ask that question actually, because we're all talking about objects that are becoming something else in its own way. Even the packaging of an object is becoming something else. From your perspective, and it's changing. So.
Yeah, there's that. I have to say, it's a process. It's a bit like opening presents sometimes. If you like the artwork within, you have this sort of big reveal. It's fantastic. It's really nice. Worked in museums plenty of times in the past, and you see these fantastic objects, historical things up close. You have access that the sort of general public doesn't have behind the scenes. It's quite a performance in itself as well. It's quite good fun, There's generally a crowd of lots of people, all who have different ideas about their own importance within that sort of system. But I'd say there's a definite change to the object, and because it's traveled as well. I know I was using that sort of analogy of sending your babies out sort of thing. I can't remember who it was. Someone like Magritte maybe came out with something about that. They're not his responsibility. They're off to have their own lives now.
Oh, maybe so that's an interesting place. Once it's gone, do we care? I think you said, like, and in sort of the kind of the world that I've come in around sort of climate change, it's about there is no way. There is no way. So, but if we're in a story of that, our responsibility is within a particular boundary, and we represent that interest. If you compare it to mycorrhizal networks, so if you saw the tree as an individual and all the nutrients were sucked up into the tree, it would actually everything would die. The mycorrhizal network actually connects all the different sort of elements of the ecology and says, oh, there's less nitrogen or phosphorus here, and move and shift the phosphorus there. So it has a different, that life, so life looks at collaborative systems, and that's what what we're talking about with the lichen as well. There are collaborative systems, and yet, so this is, are we in a mindset that looks at if we don't own something, somebody else will, so therefore we must either kill or take, because and so when we think about the power plant as well, I love that idea of the power plant, but where the resource is coming from, and I think you mentioned that there, James, they're coming from Africa and then back, and cobalt and so on, this applied knowledge that is moving and bringing it back to meet a different kind of story, resources to meet the aims of another, which is calling it like what a zombie is actually. So that you've got the fungus coming out. It's like, can we see it like that? The madness in our story of progress, zombie nations.
Yeah, James, I think we'll point that question to you. This collaborative systems, and I think there's mention. I think what's funny with the three of you, like without knowing it, this theme of like something that travels beyond its borders, beyond its what its original purpose. So yeah, James.
Yeah, so I think something just came up in my head while we were talking about, and this is not the direction I thought we were going. It's very interesting about the symbiotic relationship, about how we could be that this system is, as opposed to survival of fitness, it's like it is actually much more collaborative. And as a former biologist, who study medicine, I just the COVID environment. And I think the general public now get to see a glimpse of the genetic makeup, or to talk about as a topic of genetic makeup of a virus, and in connection with all the PCR testing of us, the human. And is something, maybe it's a fact that I think a long time ago I learned, but it didn't even come up to the surface, is that we are more virus than we are human. A virus, the protein part of our DNA, or the skin or the hair or the organs, internal genetic code is only about 4%. The zombie DNA from virus, we were able to trace this evolutionary tree, is about 5-6%. So we're actually more zombie viruses than we are human. So there is an intricate link evolutionarily. And who knows, scientists we have not, there's a lot of DNA that we thought were inert when I was going to school, that now they found function for. There's a particular DNA called telomerase. It's TA at the end of the DNA. They thought it does nothing. It just gets cut off every time the cells replicate as you age. So, apparently you get old, you should be shortened. And but apparently it has a lot to do with cancer. But again, who knows? We might be more virus. We might be less virus within us. I mean, there might be so much inert. That's definitely bacteria within us. But once you go into look at it that way, it does open a lot of way. All of a sudden being related to Wonder Bread, or with a paramecium, or with an ant. It's a lot more palpable now. Possibly with COVID's help.
I think I'm much more aware of the makeup of ourselves recently, but the whole, I think is it mitochondrial? Everyone's become much more fascinated by these interrelated systems and their reactive and a symbiotic kind of relationship. But there's also, I think everyone's realizing that we know very little about them as well. And fascinating books. Like I think I bought the Merlin guy's book for my dad, but it's one of those ones that I want to read too. It's a subject that just it blows my mind. But those levels of sort of huge interrelated systems, I think, I can't remember, there might be an underground fungal mass, if you like, and it's hundreds of acres across, and I think it's the largest known single entity on the planet. It's somewhere in America. You'll have to Google that one. I can't remember. But just the fact that must be doing some amazing things, and no one has really studied it unless they have a dig, sort of thing.
I've just shared, just obviously like so for visual reference for those who need that, the mitochondria. Oh my God, I'm glad, Ben, that you mentioned that, because that was in my notes. The way that as from Mothiur's talking about the fungus and that kind of cells and the science of it, James talking about a power plant. I believe the mitochondria is called the power plant of the body, because it's the factory that makes energy, that takes all of the sugars, like different elements and whatever you put in the body, but they're the cells that create energy. The hence so it's just funny that that has cropped up of like what's going on. So just a kind of visual there for people.
Yeah, so I think maybe from the science side, from this is relevant to the topic. So mitochondria is a bacteria cell from about, maybe I will venture to guess, 400 to 500 million years, actually maybe even billions is possible. And then it got gobbled up by a bigger bacteria. So we actually have a bacteria. Mitochondria is the bacteria cell within each of our cells. And you might have heard of something called, we all have we all share the same mother. All humans. This is called the mitochondria Eve, because mitochondria is not found in the sperm cell, it's found in the egg cell. You can only inherit the mitochondria, this factory, from your mother. So your genetic material, as much as you think is replicated, there's another piece of genetic material, it's called plasmid, and that's the circular DNA within mitochondria that replicates completely separately from your DNA. From your DNA that's outside. So in terms of evolutionary, do we know we come from bacteria? Yes, we do, because it's in all of us and we share the same mother.
That's great. And we can see that. So I think from what you're saying, Jay, the mitochondria, which is separate from mycorrhiza, mitochondria is actually a collaboration in itself. It was a bringing together of two things. And I think it was Lynn Margulis who sort of proved that in biology. But she faced a huge amount of like she was taken away. She had to lose. I think she had a lot of backlash. And this kind of brings me to this question. Well, and so we're talking about mycorrhizal, which is also like or lichen, which is a kind of collaboration as well. When we think about the original meaning of technology, I know we often think about technology as the hardware, but technology, is it applied knowledge? So it's how we apply our knowledge. And I'm often, because I'm coming from sort of the legal world and working in sort of like the legal infrastructure, the political infrastructure, the systems by which we, everything within it gets sort of drawn in. So our systems of thinking, like when we talk about, a company must meet its own success, for example, like its best interests. That's the duty. So we have these duties that look at only the mostly within the membrane of itself. Do we have a infrastructure that is mimicking nature, which has lived for billions of years, or are we mimicking a system that is one which is sticks to a story from Darwin about competition, the survival of the fittest? And do we? Yeah, that's a kind of question, a broad question.
I want to ask Ben, I think, in a way that I was just thinking like an abstract form of like you're transporting art around the world, right? So you're a system, an organism that has.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of, we act as an agent and then other agents act in the same way. There's a handover of information and items and objects. But there's, that responsibility. Again, it's that sort of passover. And we have to come to an agreement. We have to sort of make sure everyone is happy about how this process is going to take place. Because, if anything goes wrong, is that fear of the liability, which, they can be huge, really, in monetary terms. And for us, it would be, kind of, in terms of reputational, it could be yeah, that would get around it's a very small industry. Well, we thought, but now we're actually seeing numbers behind it, the sort of cultural industries that so many people are, not able to keep working in at the moment. And it's a huge moneymaker as well. But they're a system, it's global systems, and it is very much driven by markets, which are driven by all sorts of things and created by individuals within them. You know, it's a fascinating rat race type of thing. And again, it is a little bit survival of the fittest. It's very Darwinistic in that way.
What would an insurance system look like, Ben? I'm just thinking. So the insurance, insurance.
I'm not sure.
As a what was I thinking about? I was just thinking about like if it was the mycorrhizal network and it was looking at the whole system and making sure the whole system survives rather than its own needs. Could you even envisage that? Does that look like something that could be? So it's looking after the commons, for example. So this idea of the commons was a very open idea in England before commodification of the land and enclosures.
Sure.
And so this idea of the commons. So there's a concept in law called the public trust doctrine, which says that there are things, this is mostly in America, but it's Nature's Trust is the book. And she talks about, there's certain things so essential to survival that there is a trust that is implicit in that relationship. So even though somebody may own something, they have a fiduciary duty towards the whole as well. And that's a different thing. And I'm wondering, as a concept, that's part of the infrastructure I was thinking about, that, you know, we get an infrastructure that actually allows the whole to be looked at in some way.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much a sort of a surveillance system, I would say, and it's huge amounts of data behind it and collections of that data too. I guess especially with systems like insurance, it's like everything else, it's become reliant on huge amounts of information, and I guess it has to be very reactive, especially in our present circumstances as well, and adaptive. So yeah, I would say it would be a very kind of organic setup. If I try and visualize it, yeah, it is this sort of big web, interrelated mush of stuff. Yeah.
Be like just on, because I think about technology, like, because we broke up land into different interests. You know, you got the exclusive ownership. If you had this other way of looking at an object of art, and you said, even though you possess it, you don't own everything. You don't own the essential interest of the cultural heritage, to the heritage of the community of the whole, and that actually stays somewhere else. That would be quite. So then, you know, even though you sold it and so on, you've got your the element of your private interest. The public interest remains elsewhere, and somebody else is looking after that.
James, like there was some canny parallels about, like, it's funny because the questions are addressed to like Ben's work, but then complete parallels to question, what happens to, you know, like a public private good, selling something, whose responsibility, the shared commons of energy, right, of energy, electricity, and the power that drives stuff to happen.
That's right, and this is where I think, you know, the model of looking beyond within your wall, that you have this interest. I mean, there's like so there's some interest that you have that's multi-generational, that go beyond a particular time frame, that is not satisfied by the immediate needs. We see this in biological systems because biological system can go extinct. They disappeared. I think what's different from a man-made system to this natural system is that there is this temporal ability to go beyond, look beyond, that you can go beyond nature. Time will change, and you are able to. So this is public-private thing. It's a perspective of, can you step out of your own skin, or in a sense, step out of the time where it will benefit you. because if I consider would it benefit my kids, that benefits me because it makes me happy, or because they're important. So that's so in a, so I think this divide is often, and this is where money does that to us. The capitalist system, the current system, does something that introduction of a unit of measurement does something to us in terms of trade of good, does something to us in the body that's quite unnatural. It disallow this generational temporal way of looking at the future, where why is there should be a divide between me and my kids? Why is there a divide between me and my fellow humans? Why is that not part of my interest? It's not my happiness that I should be worried about. So public, private, internal, external, in natural system, they go extinct because that's, but on a conscious one, on something that have now controlled space and time, you can be much more. So those are, again, human creations. And then I think you need to draw that distinction between nature and not nature, and technology in of itself. Yes, it can come from natural one, but then us humans, conscious beings, can manipulate its temporal location. Sorry, not to go deeply, but that's kind of one of these like considering what's abstraction, what's and what's real. And again, you got to take this perspective. Am I a paramecium? Then technology, that consciousness will not matter. But they have no temporal. They don't live temporally. They can, but as much as they can, it is only a certain amount, and it's more backward than it is forward.
I love it because like this is the beauty of this is that for a lot of students, like the mundane, the boring, the dull, the commonplace, and arguably we could say piece of bread, and yes, Wonder Bread, but at the same time it's just bread, the battery, the brick, the box. These are kind of commonplace items, and yet we start talking about consciousness and the meaning of life. So I find that hilarious. Like the words that came out from all three of you was like with especially with the crate, like trying to get the maximum life out of it, of like the sense of survival, the sense of like traveling across borders. What did you say? As Mothiur asking this, everything is just wanting to be something else. And then this whole notion of like there's so much of life and this type of magic and systems that happens behind the scenes, and it is uncanny that the three of you have kind of are talking about life bursting behind the scenes of like what is not seen necessarily as say exciting like magic or kind of more kind of again less mundane objects or viewpoints, and from the bread to the box. So I'm gonna share this as a private joke as to okay, what happens next? Like what do we do with all of these three items? And because of what you just said, I'm like, it looks like fate has led us back to this Vitruvian man. It's like a lot of these questions of like what drives us, what powers us to go beyond, to make something out of ourselves, to kind of participate in the private and public sphere, all like daily, right, to and from, inside, outside. And yeah, so I'm like reading my notes from my banana that essentially like yeah, I think a big thing of like the power plant, like there are units, small and big, that we measure, but as we organize ourselves and we create this movement that we also want to just be happy. So I like I like that Ben's job really was just like, we just want to make sure people are happy. We just that they get or the idea of what's in the box, like the present, the life-giving force of what is this box going to do? Like it's just a box, but there's something in it. It's just a brick, but it generates life, like opportunities, and hence with the bread that that something else happens from what is seemingly mundane, and the madness that ensues when I think life breaks force, and in these situations. So that is an hour. Oh my God. Thank you. I'm really pleased, and I hope you are also. The unexpected result of what happens when you talk about this theme and using this just one object. What students do with this afterwards, who knows? But thank you. We are moving to the social classes is our next episode. But here we are again, wrapping up to just say thank you to you, Mothiur, James, and Ben, for a very philosophical conversation in the end about the most mundane and simple of things. And yet an ecosystem, like there's definitely more than meets the eye with these items. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you
so
so much. It was
much.
really